Good evening. Call to order the City of Bethany Planning and Zoning Commission for May 4th, 2017. Invocation tonight will be from Commissioner Mark Long.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this day, and thank you for the blessing of such a beautiful day for us to be together today and this evening. We thank you so much for providing for us and providing for our well-being as we live our lives together. We pray for your wisdom and blessing on this commission as we make decisions tonight, and we ask these things in Jesus Christ's name, amen.
We have a quorum and would like to welcome Justin Peck, our new representative, the mayor's appointee. Justin is real bashful, so be sure and go up and introduce yourselves to him.
Thanks.
As a matter of explanation to the audience, the Planning and Zoning Commission is a recommending body. We hear items that will be going on to the City Council. The City Council may accept, reject, or modify our proposals. The first item this evening, PC 1702, consider amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Bethany, Title 15, Chapter 155, pertaining to site plan approvals and requirements, providing for scope, certificate of occupancy required, submission of site plan when required, conditions for approval, perpetual compliance, facade requirements, commercial, industrial, and central business district, landscaping requirements, method of appeal from landscaping requirements, and providing for repealer and severability, and declaring an emergency. Staff?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Do we want to approve the minutes from the last meeting either now or at the end of the meeting?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let us go ahead with this one, and then we'll come back, if you will. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. Tonight is a little bit different than we're used to, where we've got actual ordinances to deal with instead of applications for various things going on. So that's a little bit different. All three of them fall into the same category, so I'll only have to say this one once. Section 159.072 of the City of Bethany Code of Ordinances states that the following matters shall be submitted to the Commission for investigation, report, review, or recommendation before final action is taken by the City Council. And there's a big long list, but the one for tonight is item 3 on all proposed ordinances amending or added to the provisions contained in Title 15. And anything that starts with a 1-5 is in Title 15, so that's why you guys get a first cut at these ordinance amendments. So item 1, PC 1702, is an amendment to the site plan ordinance. There are several of them. Mr. Davis was good enough to go ahead and include the entire site plan ordinance in your packet with the proposed changes highlighted in bold, the old words scratched out, and the new words in bold print. Starting on page 6 will be the actual wording. The staff report starts on page 3. I will go over the background a little bit. The current site plan ordinance was developed in 1973 based on the 1972 comp plan, which has not been a favorite of many developers for the last decade or so. It's been accused of being outdated, overreaching, and accused of doing a lot of the damage that we think we might have done as far as development has been concerned, certainly commercial development. And these changes are proposed to maybe give a little bit of relief. The hope is that the new comp plan will soon have ordinances to go and enact it. Right now we're still operating under the old ordinances, and until we can get those new Title 15 amendments written, these small changes to the site plan ordinance would be a good start in the right direction. But we'll move on. Specifically, The changes, we'll start with 155.01A. This is just a housekeeping measure to change the word from city planner on the authority to approve to community development director. We have not had an official city planner position probably for as long as I've been here, 18 and a half years, so this would be a good time to change that to the modern definition of who has the approval authority at the staff level. The next item is a removal of city council from the approval process. I'm going to delay that till we can talk about it a little later on down the way. 155.03A also changes, again, the staff reference from city planner to community development director, just another housekeeping measure to make it consistent with the current personnel alignment. 155.05B3. This is the first of the significant changes. And basically what it does is removes the requirement to upgrade existing paving to current city standards. It's no secret to you guys, a lot of the times the thing that holds up a site plan or anything like that is the street paving doesn't meet current standard. The current standard is either through a 26-foot or 32-foot concrete street with curb and gutter and the right-of-way to go with it. This does not change the right-of-way requirement, but it does say if there is existing hard surface paving there, you do not have to upgrade it to current standards. The reason for that is a street reconstruction is very, very expensive. Even a half-street reconstruction could easily go $100 to $200 per linear foot, and most of the time you've been here very long, you've heard some people asking for a covenant to get away from the paving. Even if you grant it, that puts a cloud on the title. So it's just one of those things that increases the cost or the uncertainty associated with non-residential development. And it's thought that perhaps reducing or eliminating that requirement would then let a developer or potential developer know exactly where he stands in the process, and there won't be any uncertainty or extravagant costs associated with it. Again, it doesn't make a lot of sense on a mid-block development even to make them do a half-street repair right in front of their little lot and then have bad street on either side. Is probably not going to meet and match right if we ever did the whole block. So it's not there. Perhaps on a corner lot it may not be quite as onerous because you've got another meet and match coming in from the other side. But even then it's probably not going to match if you do the whole block. Again, this amendment does not remove the requirement that they provide additional right-of-way. That way we'll have the right-of-way should we ever decide to go and do a street reconstruction or utility upgrades or things like that where the right-of-way is required. So they would still have to grant right-of-way, just wouldn't have to do the paving upgrade. Okay, what are the risks associated with this? Basically, if we don't make them upgrade the paving and there's a nice new commercial development, we hope there would be a lot more traffic, so you're going to have more traffic on a substandard piece of paving. That could lead to increased maintenance and repair costs by city crews, which would mean the cost to the city would go up. Not necessarily, but that could happen. And I should mention, it has been a long-standing city policy that developers should bear the cost of development since they are generally the primary beneficiaries of that development in the form of profits. This amendment might be interpreted that we're shifting some of those costs, development costs, to the citizens away from the developer. The other argument would be, well, without that, then there would be no development and we wouldn't get sales tax and those sorts of things. So that just kind of lays that out there, what the costs and the benefits are to an ordinance amendment like this. This has been talked about for many, many years, and the current leadership of the city would now like to get this in front of the decision makers and see if this is a good thing for us to do. That's about all I have in my report for that section. So we can move on to 155.03B3, which is a very similar change, except it's for water lines. Obviously, we want to make sure that there's adequate fire protection and adequate domestic water available. What this says is if there is a fire hydrant within 300 feet, which is our normal ordinance requirement, and if a hydraulic analysis shows that adequate water service can be provided in accordance with regulatory requirements, then you do not have to upgrade the water line to current city standards, whether that would be a looped 6-inch or a dead end 8-inch. If that 4-inch is there in front of your building, there's a fire hydrant at the end of the block within 300 feet, and the 4-inch will provide adequate domestic service, then you don't have to upgrade that 4-inch to the current standards, which would be a 6 or an 8, depending on the situation. In order to maintain safety and regulatory compliance, again, you have to be within 300 feet, and we will require the developer to demonstrate that that water pressure will be adequate. That should take the form of either an engineering study or a ruling from the fire department that would say under their conditions there's going to be plenty. I suspect it's going to be mostly an engineering study to make sure that's going to happen. We do have state requirements to make sure that we can maintain at least 25 psi pressure under all flow conditions, which includes firefighting conditions. So that usually would imply a fairly rigorous technical analysis. Again, the risk is the same. If we don't make someone upgrade their section of water line, if the city ever comes back and decides to do the entire block, then that much water line would have already been done, and now the citizens would have to pick up the bill for that additional cost. 155.03B3 removes all of the upgrade requirements for water, sewer, and street facilities if the project is only a parking lot. Sometimes we do get projects where they want to expand their parking lot, something along those lines, and to make them go through a full site plan procedure and the water and upgrade water and sewer lines, it doesn't really make much sense for a parking lot upgrade. We will keep the stormwater requirements, of course, because a bigger parking lot means more runoff, and so they would still have to do detention or whatever else to ensure there won't be any runoff problems with it. Again, this one's a little harder, but it's just a matter of whether or not we want to keep that policy of the developer needs to pay all the development costs, or if we would rather eliminate some of the more onerous ones so that we can get more development and hopefully more revenue for the city. Okay, now it's on to 155.04C. And this one's a little more nuanced, but the current ordinance basically says it lists a whole lot of things that have to be on a site plan, including these off-site improvements. And all of those must be present if you want to get staff approval. What that means is the city council gives me the power to approve a site plan, but they keep a really short leash on me and say all these things have to be in place before I have the authority to approve a site plan. It goes on to say any other site plan, meaning those that don't meet all those requirements, can be approved by the council after review by this body. The proposed amendment is that we remove that council approval option. Basically, you will comply with the ordinance and all the things on it, or you don't get an approval. There's not any uncertainty in there anymore. You have to do these things or you don't get it approved. Okay, what's the good side of that is, again, it removes that uncertainty. Here's what you have to do, and that's what you're going to do. Coupled with the water and sewer and paving changes that we've talked about before, that removes the biggest hurdles we have to deal with on site plans. But it still keeps most of those in there, and it keeps the council from being, and the planning and zoning from being put in that position of deciding who gets an exception or who doesn't. That was the theory behind that. On the downside would be, some people will say, well, now we're just going towards a less flexible, one size fits all, everybody does the same thing kind of deal, which doesn't sound like the way we want to go. Again, those are not as strong an argument when you remove the more onerous problems, but it does make a certain amount of sense. Lastly, the Code of Ordinances does grant the Board of Adjustment the power to hear appeals of a decision of a zoning regulation by an administrative official, and lots of the requirements of the site plan refer back to the zoning ordinance. If it's not something zoning ordinance related, that might not be an automatic appeal that's out there, so that could be something that's a little less flexible as well. But of course, the city manager is the supervisor of the community development director, and he could review anything in just a normal employee chain of command type review. So it's not like one person would be the absolute ruler, but it would be a little less automatic. It's not uncommon for someone to turn in a site plan that's got lots and lots of deficiencies, and they don't want to address any of them. I just want to go straight to the council. And so that's kind of what this is designed to get around, that no, you're going to have to comply with the site plan requirements, and we're not going to be granting exceptions after exceptions after exceptions. The city manager doesn't believe that puts the planning and zoning or the council in a very positive position. It puts you in a bad spot where there's almost never a good answer to come out of it. And he does recommend the approval of this ordinance. We do need to hold a public hearing and make recommendation to the council. Staff has recommended approval of the housekeeping language amendments where we're changing from from city planner to community development. But the policy decisions, I think the commission recommendation would be better. I forgot to talk about the last of the language changes, and that's in the landscape. There is a clarifying language in there to the appeals section to make sure that language applies only to the landscape provisions and not the entire ordinance. So that's another one of those housekeeping measures that staff would approve. Again, the city manager has recommended approval, but he has made a request that your recommendation not go to council on May 16th, but instead on September 5th. The reason behind that is we have 4 or 5 site plans out there that are kind of in limbo, and they probably will need that council option available. They've been in the process for a very long time, and they are basically going to be told if you don't get your business together by this date, then you will be under the new rules, and that'll be that. So he has asked that we could delay that and make that part of your recommendation, should you choose to make such a recommendation. I believe that's all in my report. I would be happy to answer any questions you might have. Again, it's a public hearing item, and other than that, I'm ready to go.
Steve, I might just supplement what you said. You need to bear in mind this does not apply to single family or
Correct.
two family. You're talking about all the other use
Right.
groups, and it also doesn't apply to minor alterations as well.
If
So
it's less than 10% of the existing building, you're automatically exempt from the site plan ordinance. So it's just a relatively big change to it, or a new building altogether, yes.
the most frequent things you've seen come under this are either commercial or educational, institutional uses. That's what you've typically
Right.
seen this apply to.
And churches seem to be doing a lot of building lately, so.
Commissioners, any questions?
Guess I'll start.
Right ahead.
So on the city planner / commercial development director change in here, I understand we haven't had a city planner in forever. I don't know. Were those job descriptions meant to be the same at one point in time and the same authority, et
They've
cetera?
always been similar. If you want to know the truth, it goes all the way back. The city engineer used to be the head of the department, and the planner worked for him.
Okay.
And then that got swapped, and in various redos of the personnel, they just changed that. When that position became the head of the department, they modernized it by referring to it as the director of community development. But it's been that way for at least 18 and a half years. I'm not sure, if maybe David could tell us when they changed the official title.
I don't recall.
Yeah, but,
Okay, so something that just needs to be updated
yeah.
to what we do, okay.
Are we going to discuss any of the rest of the ordinance? I have questions about those, not necessarily the changes.
As far as I know, you can certainly ask questions about the ordinance.
Okay.
The changes are the only thing that's being proposed, to the commission, but sure.
Anybody object?
Go ahead, sir.
I'm going to get deep in the weeds here. 55012A says a building addition to an existing building with gross floor area less than 10% of the combined gross floor areas of all existing buildings.
Yes.
And it goes on from there. Does that include accessory buildings?
No. Well, in a non-residential structure, it's sometimes difficult to tell what an accessory building is.
Yeah.
normally, if you're going towards accessory structures as far as getting special permits, that's normally that's for residential only.
right.
In a commercial standpoint, that really wouldn't apply. That ordinance doesn't apply to
They
the
don't do
non-residential.
accessory buildings.
I'm sorry?
They don't do, commercials don't do accessory buildings.
They do, but the accessory structure ordinance only applies to residential. So
Oh.
this doesn't apply to residential,
No,
but
I
accessory
understand.
structures would take
Yeah.
care of that.
Okay, my confusion. Um, 15503A, it talks about registered land surveyor, and I assume that means registered professional engineer also. The better terminology is licensed.
Yes,
Can we change that?
you could, yes.
Just takes a motion and recommendation and all that stuff.
Is an engineer by necessity a surveyor or not?
No. He's just talking about, they've recently changed the name on engineer from a registered engineer to a licensed engineer. That's a state wording they've
That'd
changed.
be an easy fix if that's incorrect.
Oh, that's all I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Isn't a professional engineer a licensed engineer?
A licensed professional engineer is the same thing, but when you say professional engineer,
Where was that
Put that little,
reference? What section?
155.03A.
Page 7, the top.
page 7 up the top,
Yeah.
about 10 lines down.
I believe it's a licensed land surveyor now too, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah,
one,
that's
so I don't
correct.
know.
They're both licensed.
That's
yeah.
what I thought.
So that, both of those should be changed to licensed, is that what you're saying?
I believe they should, yes. I'm not sure
The
about
word
architect.
registered should be stricken and
Licensed.
licensed in its place.
So I'll go deeper into the weeds. Does it need to be a,
And the engineer is also licensed, is that correct?
Well, that's my reading of how this registered land surveyor, and I'm assuming it says registered professional engineer. So what I'm saying is that instead of registered, it's a licensed land surveyor and a licensed professional engineer.
Got it.
does it matter where they're registered? Because I mean,
If they're
engineering.
licensed,
Be
they
the
are
same thing, I
registered.
would think.
Yeah,
but
but for
the-
the state of Oklahoma or for another state? Because you can get it.
It has to be, if they're doing work in Oklahoma, they have to be licensed in Oklahoma. They can be from another state, but they got to be licensed in Oklahoma.
And for the record, I like registered. I license my dog. I'd rather have a registration than a license. They didn't ask me.
I grew up wanting to be registered, but that's not how it's termed now.
That's right.
It's just like being a senior engineer. I like that term, but
Yeah.
they've changed it to lead engineer or some such thing. Down a little further on the page, 155.3A10, the proposed method of providing for stormwater drainage, would that be like a grading plan or a drainage plan? or
In
should-
general, it's a complete package, yes. In general, they will turn in a complete drainage study. It will have the plans that show drainage basins, basin areas, hydraulic flow paths, curve numbers, coefficients, all of that stuff, as well as the
Steve,
calculations.
what I'm asking is, should we come to the end of that, i.e. grading plan, drainage plan, some kind of,
I would recommend not at this point. Your ordinance is written somewhat open-ended, but essentially it says the applicant shall demonstrate, and has a lot of nice words, but basically it says that the applicant shall demonstrate that you will not cause problems upstream or downstream. The city doesn't dictate how to do that. It leaves it up to the designer to do that, and then the
Okay.
city's role is to check the design and make sure that it does meet that requirement. But it still puts the certification and calculations onto the designer instead of onto the city. So there is some talk, though, to come up with a comprehensive drainage ordinance that would spell out exactly what a drainage plan has to contain, which would make my life a lot easier.
Yeah.
But at this point, we leave it up to the licensed engineer to decide what's the best way to pursue it.
But rather than call out something as specific as a grading plan or a drainage plan, you
At this
recommend
point,
not
I would not recommend that, no.
Okay.
I do it anyway, just in case you want to know. Mark can tell you that we do make certain things happen before they get approved, but it's not specifically written down.
Near the end of the page, 5503, 14, it talks about the dumpster location and the thickness of the pad for the dumpster. Well, shouldn't the roadway to the dumpster also be that same 6 inches for the weight of the truck that's coming to pick it up?
Again, once you get onto private property, that would be a little bit hard for us to dictate. The policy has always been when you ask for commercial service, that's implied on there that you're going to let our trucks come on and you need to have adequate infrastructure to do it. The dumpster pad itself, I'll be honest with you, a lot of them, the truck just pulls up in front of it and the guys get off and actually roll the dumpster out to the truck instead of backing all the way up and get it. But that's kind of the call of the driver.
Yeah.
And you're right, if it's a little gamey getting to it, sometimes
Well,
they won't do it.
There's also a location that they put their dumpster about almost halfway into the street and I've seen it partway into the street.
Yeah.
On
They're-
Tompkins, you've probably seen.
They're
what I'm
not supposed to be on the right of way, but
Yeah,
there are
but
some that are, yes.
That are. Well, my thought was, particularly for new locations, that it would save them from having a repair problem with that heavy truck coming on site to pick it up. And that's why I was thinking it ought to all be 6 inches where the path of the truck generally would run. But
It's certainly something that could be talked about. It wasn't proposed for this ordinance change, but it's certainly something that might.
so now or later, huh? Okay.
Can I ask a question? So, well, it's kind of like what was stated in the purpose of this. This is a temporary
Right.
measure to be able to address a few logistical issues related to how the approval process. And I think in the background you stated, we're actually going to come back. You're actually going through a process to
That-
hire a consultant
Right.
to go through all the ordinances.
Correct.
So this section is going to get in-depth revamped.
That is my hope, that this section will be amended to match the goals of the Comprehensive Plan 2030, yeah.
And I think that would be, in that exercise, it would be good for this body to be involved in kind of a workshop format, maybe, with the consultant, once staff has gone through it, and then we can, go through. But that's why I was trying to figure out, well, what are we trying to accomplish here? We're trying to accomplish just some temporary, quote, housekeeping measures here tonight.
I wouldn't call them housekeeping. They're more significant than that, but it's trying to reduce some of the more onerous, the paving and water lines are the big expenses and the big uncertainties when it comes to non-residential development. That's time and time again, those are the ones we do. And then, okay, we're going to remove those two hurdles, but then we're also going to make you stick to the rules, and that's going to be that, and no more other ways to get around.
Well, I think that's where you were coming from.
Right.
Is it now or never?
Now or never.
And the
Yeah.
answer is, this is just some bureaucratic changes to the process, and the
Yeah.
never is not now, today.
Thank you, Commissioner. That is exactly right. This is just I don't want to call it a Band-Aid or something like that, but it's hoped that this is a temporary to get us moving in the direction that everyone thinks we want to go, but we're not quite ready to completely revamp the ordinance and move on. But these are a couple of changes we can make that should get us moving in that direction and maybe get us to where we want to go a little faster.
So in the long-term thinking or thought process on the staff, timetable, target dates for when
The city
you-
manager is talking with professional firms that do this for a living to write the ordinances to match our Title 15. I myself have supplied copies of the comp plan and Title 15 to companies that are looking at doing that sort of work for us. So I think the last proposal I saw, I believe, said it would take about 4 months to go through the Title 15 and comp plan and get the two mated together. So
maybe 2018 or?
yeah, I would say by the end of the year, we should be getting very close if we're
Okay,
not
so-
already there.
Okay.
I have no further comments.
Steve, I was just thinking, you were talking about how sometimes under the current ordinance, the decisions are difficult both for this body and
Yeah.
the city council. I think it'd be helpful, especially for the new member, if maybe we just took one of those difficult ones and show how this would be different for it than it was when they struggled through that one. School might be a good example.
Yeah, the Bethany Public Schools had two site plans come before this body and the city council, and the paving on Asbury and 42nd Street were not up to current standards, even though, it's there, they've been using it, it's all there, but they could not get that site plan approved without coming here, asking for a paving covenant or an exception or something to keep from having to completely rebuild that street, which would have completely shot their budget above what their bond issue was because they hadn't planned on it. And it just added at least 6 weeks to their site plan approval process and could have potentially shot the whole thing in the foot because of the funding issues. Now, other people should have said, well, they should have known that's what the law said and moved on, but we grant paving covenants so often, I can certainly understand why someone would make that assumption that they weren't going to have to do that. So, but again, it's that uncertainty and then having to deal with that. It adds time to it, and then potential costs sometimes will run developers off. I've personally had people tell me that there's nothing wrong with Bethany. I can make money in Bethany, but I can make more money in Edmond or Yukon because I don't have to worry about these kinds of development things. So they have ready to build lots and things like
Would this
that.
water exception that's in here, would that have applied to the school? I can't remember.
I don't know if they could have made the domestic. They didn't have a fire hydrant within 300 feet, so no, they would have had to put the fire line in anyway.
But that one was primarily the paving.
The paving was a big issue, yeah.
Does that help kind of put it in perspective?
They wound up not having to rebuild it, but they had to go through a 6-week cycle and a couple of public hearings to get there. So
And that stretch of road they would have been paving was what, 100 feet or so?
on that particular lot, maybe 150, yeah.
So times 200
Right.
dollars a foot, you can see that's a
Right.
substantial amount of money.
Do those other cities, Yukon and Edmond, do they have similar such ordinances as we're trying to change to? Or is that something that's going to be left up to the
Yukon is less
consultant?
stringent on some of theirs, and Edmond is like the mother of all stringents. It's easy to develop here compared to what Edmond does.
So it's not the ordinances that are impeding the development in those two places because they're
Yeah.
still developing.
It's a little more than that. Edmond still has undeveloped areas.
Right.
We are infill and redevelopment, so it makes less sense to make people do piecemeal street repairs and things like that than if you've got a brand new wide open canvas where you're building a new street anyway. Obviously, if it's a new street, you
Yeah.
make them do it. So I wouldn't say those are exactly parallel. Edmond's kind of where Bethany was in 1968, 1972, where we're still growing and new infrastructure. We're now to a point where it's infill and redevelopment, so that's probably not a good analogy to compare us to Edmond right now.
Well,
I mean,
you brought it up. I was just,
So a question on that comparison. This, though, will actually accommodate Bethany to follow more of a process of the other metropolitan cities where it's done at a staff level.
Right.
And not going to either this commission or to the council,
Right.
just because it allows the staff level, the community development director, to go back and forth through an iterative process with the
Right.
developer to get everything done on the checklist.
Which is the process we go through now, but ultimately the developer knows that he's always got that other option, and if he wants to throw his hands up and then come try to use what I call non-technical methods to get his approval, and that's not the way it's usually done.
Which in a way is self-defeating, because then you're just throwing
Right.
it into the politicized process
Right.
rather than let's hold firm to a checklist and this is what we need to do.
Right,
From a technical standpoint.
precisely.
and they do get this checklist,
Absolutely.
and they know what it is
They know
before
exactly
they
what
even
they have to do.
start.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And I have one more question. So on the pending delay, delaying the date.
Yes.
On the pending site plans, are those recently pending? What's the process going to be for how?
These
How will they-
entities are going to submit plans. I hate to call it, but it's going to be along the lines of an as-built type site plan. And that site plan will be presented for approval. Whether it was something that was done outside the site plan ordinance or contrary to an existing approved site plan, either way, it was construction that was undertaken that probably was not done in an optimal fashion. And, we just would like to get these people up to speed and legal and behind us, and so that we can get that taken care of.
And that allows the time
They've had lots of time, but that now they're getting a final, this is it. You have to finish it up and go
A
on.
date certain.
A date certain, that's right.
And then on the, the whole patchwork of pavement and what was there, I mean, that was really abandoned by Oklahoma City 20 years ago.
forever, yeah.
Because 150 to 200 feet of pavement, and then you have a gap, and then you have another
Yeah.
gap. So do we have examples of that here right now that?
I wish I could tell you any specific ones. The only ones I know of that are just, that I can think of off the top of my head were corner lots where it's not quite as obvious. Where the Sonic is at 39th Expressway in Beaver, they did Half Street right on the corner. The new Simmons Automotive did Half Street over here. A lot of the times when Southern Plaza across the street did their half street, the city came behind them and did the other half, but in a piecemeal fashion. They built their half, and then we had to meet and match their pavement, which was not optimal for both sides. So again, it put more work on the city side. I'm trying to think of where there might be
One of the worst examples is Glade between 30th and 32nd Street.
Well,
where it's
fortunately-
paved on
yeah.
the east
Fortunately,
side.
that one has actually been outlawed. Now, that one was so bad, that can't be done anymore. You can't do that anymore, yeah. But most of them, Commissioner Long, if it's mid-block, they get a covenant and move on.
And then the covenants that have been addressed in the past, how that's been done, those are all going to remain in effect. So anything we do
Absolutely.
here
Yeah.
doesn't change those
No,
covenants.
they're still in
So
effect, and if we ever go back and redo the street, they're still on the hook for their cost, yes.
that's all I have.
Commissioners, if we're through beating up on our presenter, since this is a public hearing item, I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to address this item to come forward to the podium. Hearing or seeing none, we will go back to our trip to the weed patch. Thank you, Commissioner. Is there any further discussion?
The only comment that I have, and
it's more of a concern of checks and balances, is 155.04C, where we're basically eliminating the review by planning and zoning and the city council. I understand Mr. Payton's comments of turning technical requirements into political requirements, but I also can see where there might be some need for oversight by this body and then a recommendation to the council. And it might be that we tweak that to something to the effect of that if a developer feels that the city staff is being too technical or too restrictive in their reading of something regarding the site plan, that there's still that option to come here, and that we would be limited maybe in some fashion where we don't fashion a remedy, but we simply agree or disagree that they have or have not met the requirements.
Would that be more of a function of the Board of Adjustment?
Well, except that I can see, or I can imagine a situation that doesn't necessarily fall under zoning. And to me, what you're going to end up with, if there's a disagreement, is then they're going to try to couch it in terms of zoning versus the other requirements. I'm just concerned about a checks and balances situation, because while the current staff may be amenable to development, in the future, we don't know what that might hold.
And that's a very valid concern. But I would remind you, like I say, the zoning that has an automatic trip to the BOA if they want to appeal. That's been done many times in the past. And I can assure you that many developers have used the city manager position to say just what you said. I think your man's being too technical, too nitpicky, whatever, and that sort of a review happens by the city at the city manager level. That is not a decision maker level, as you pointed out, but that type of review is possible at the staff, chain of command type level. But I certainly understand the point, and I believe that's why that method is in there, for that very reason, so that maybe a more strict interpretation might not be what the...
What I'm thinking of is maybe something that might narrow our review so that it wouldn't be, as you kind of described it, as a political,
Right.
Tugging at our heartstrings, so to speak. But at the same time, I still like the idea of somebody being able to come to a citizen board, whether it be planning and zoning, and then maybe the city council. So, but that's just my comment on that. The rest of it, I don't have a big problem with. I think it would make a lot of sense to get rid of the paving covenants and some of the other things that, as you say, interfere with proper developments.
Right.
Yeah, the way this ordinance is currently written, if they come to city staff and don't meet the requirements, it's denied, and their option is district court at that point. That's the way it's written now.
Do you ever,
So instead of coming here, they would have to go to district court,
That's right.
which would be quite expensive. Yes.
But this, the process of bringing this to council is fairly expensive too, because we have to give notice to surrounding property owners, and it's burdensome and time consuming as well. It could even, I guess I would have concern about the Board of Adjustment deciding whether the hydraulic pressure was sufficient to serve the property or not. That's really not something they're capable of. And really this body or the city council is typically not trained to make those kind of decisions. Those are technical matters.
But that's why you hire a consultant to make those calculations, determinations, and he's putting his license up for. bond, if you will.
Yeah, but you could have some, let's say that staff said the hydraulic pressure of the water at your building is inadequate to serve that property. You wouldn't want them coming before you, I don't think, and arguing that it was. I mean, it wouldn't appear to me you would.
Well, if they had a engineer's report that says it's adequate. then
But
maybe
we're gonna
we-
have one that says it doesn't.
Well,
So.
they were in a, you know what kind of contest.
Yeah. I don't know that, but the Board of Adjustment, you know, could hear things where it was alleged the decision was arbitrary or capricious. Maybe that kind of language would fit better.
So
And that's what you're talking about, not whether they should or shouldn't, but whether staff was being arbitrary.
So when you talk about all the requirements, and, you know, there's a lot for all of this, that at the staff level you could approve and various functions or whatnot, do they line up with surrounding communities pretty well? I mean, there's not something that one, you know, hey, you know, we didn't have any kind of this kind of stuff in Yukon or in wherever and wherever. I mean, we wouldn't be
There,
comparable, I guess.
there's
in
not
that
a
aspect.
developer in the world that's shy about telling me that we're the worst on the planet and appealing my decisions to the city manager. They're not at all shy about that. But in reality, every city in the metro area has a site plan or a development ordinance. There are differences between them. Ours, I'm not going to say it's onerous. I've seen lots of other cities, and they're so similar that they're not that bad. That's the main reason you have to be one of these licensed professionals, because the licensed professionals know what this means, and they understand how to do it, and they put it on there. Commissioner Long, am I being somewhat accurate on that?
Well, yeah, there's dozens and dozens and
Yeah.
dozens, just from my own personal experience, of times where you go through this process, you deal with community development director, city planner, city engineer. Yes, you have their engineer, their architect, their, you know, hydraulic people. Everyone is involved in that. And it comes kind of back to what Mr. Davis was saying. It's really not the position of this board then to make that determination. If their professional engineer says something is one way and the city's professional engineer on staff at a staff level says it's not, then the answer is no. And that's not being adverse to development. It's saying let's just do it the right way per the checklist. Now, you know, you may have to go back 3 and 4 times to work out that compromise to make that happen. But doing it on the horseshoe at the council and at this body doesn't really accomplish anything, because you're talking about things that really we as a commission shouldn't be doing.
But ours is not exactly like the other cities,
Well, yeah,
but,
I just,
but
you
they
know-
all have the same kind of a process to go through. And like I said, the design professionals understand that, and that's usually step one, is could I have a copy of your ordinance so we can see what we need to do? And that's not unusual at all.
You know, some cities even have another step before you get here. They have a citizen design committee
Yes.
or a design committee you have to go through. And that even adds another hurdle, and
Right.
that can sometimes get real political, especially when you get into historical preservation and those
Right.
kinds of things. But if you want us to look at something along the line that Commissioner Snyder's looking at, I don't think I could give you anything off the top of my head tonight, but certainly we could come back with some proposals to look at that. But my impression would be it would probably be something regarding arbitrary and capricious action. But that certainly would be doable.
Well, that might work from the standpoint that then that would set a level, a hurdle, if you will, that they would have to.
Well, that's not an easy standard to meet.
Exactly, so they would have to come here and convince us that it had My only thought was, if you have only government agents making that decision with no recourse, or potentially no recourse, I should say, to a citizen body, then that just, it made me think that checks and balances could be excused.
I might just say that because the city manager has asked that this be postponed for final adoption, there's certainly nothing wrong with you continuing this item to another meeting and asking us to bring you back some additional language on it if you want to.
Well, again, I'm speaking for myself. I don't know how the rest of the commissioners feel, but I could certainly try to fashion a motion, unless we have other comments.
Are there any other comments? Would you like to make your stab at fashioning the motion, sir?
Does this also include the signage?
No, I haven't got there yet.
Not yet. I would make a motion that we approve or recommend approval of the changes to section 155.01 cap A, regarding the change to Community Development Director, section 155.0 cap A, with regard to removal of the city council from the approval process, that we table that for future discussion. Section 155.03 cap A, the change to Community Development Director be approved. That the recommendation regarding section 155.05B3 regarding the paving covenant be approved. That the change to section 155.03B3 regarding the existing water line upgrade, that be approved. The change to section 155.03B3 regarding the upgrades to existing water, sewer, street facilities when there's only a parking lot involved, that be approved. That we table section 155.04 cap C, and that we approve section, the recommended change to section 155.07 cap H.
Can I make a couple of suggestions?
Sure.
15503A also should include Commissioner Clemmer's recommendation on changing the names of those
From registered to
professional
licensed?
people from registered to licensed. And the other suggestion I have is that since this is advertised as a public hearing, I'd suggest we continue it to a date certain. Do we have another meeting scheduled? Do you want it that soon, or do you want to go into June?
Does that give you enough time to?
Oh, I'm sure it does.
I'm sorry, what was the?
May 18th, I believe. There are other items on that agenda. Yeah.
I have no objection to
Well, I think your motion ought to include to continue it to that
that.
date.
Continue it to everything, or just the items that were tabled?
Just,
Actually, we'll table the whole ordinance till then.
Table it till the 18th?
Yeah.
So that'd be an easy motion.
I think
But
we
you
just
also
found-
want staff to bring in some, one or more alternate languages for some escape mechanism.
Correct.
Could we still make a motion to vote on this tonight, though?
Well,
Yes.
We'll vote on his motion at this time, if I understand it, is to table
Table it
until,
and come up with some alternative language regarding the planning and zoning and city council engagement or disengagement, as the case might be.
The fail-safe switch.
Fail-safe switch. any other changes, we would continue that also, the licensing. That seems awful messed up, but I think it's primarily to table it. And look at
You've got it,
some-
don't you? Linda's got it, I think. You need a second.
She has her unscrambler at hand.
Sorry, Linda.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
If there's no further discussion, please cast your votes. You got that? Commissioner Snyder reminded me that I omitted the review of the previous minutes. Council members, are there any corrections, changes, or deletions to the minutes from March 2nd? If there are none, do I have a motion to approve?
I make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Second?
Please cast your votes. Thank you. Okay,
Were you here on the sign ordinance? Is that the, yeah, that's correct.
okay. Item number 2, PC 1703. Consider amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Bethany, Oklahoma, Title 15, Section 15305, pertaining to sign permits, requirements, exceptions and inspections, providing for application requirements, providing rules for approval of community banners, providing for repealer and severability, and declaring an emergency. Staff?
I think this one will be a little bit less lengthy in the staff report anyway. Basically, this is just an amendment to our sign regulations for what we call community promotional banners. These are the relatively small banner signs that you occasionally see, and sometimes they're on Main Street. Sometimes they have them down on 23rd for the Ride to Remember and places like that. Basically, under the current ordinance, the City Council has overall approval authority, as well as specific approval of the maximum time the banners may be displayed and of the actual wording and design of the banner itself. The proposed amendments would transfer those approval authorities on community promotional banners from the City Council to the City Manager. The reason for this is to streamline the approval process for the community promotional banners. The current ordinance takes several weeks to get through the process. The applicant has to invest resources in coming up with a sign design, wording, things like that, get it in front of staff, get it on the council agenda, and then it goes to council for review, comment, and possible revision. So if the council decides they don't like a red sign instead of a blue or whatever, then they have to go back and make those changes, and you've just added another cycle in there. The idea is that if the city manager has that approval authority, then all that can be done in a sit-down, give-and-take meeting, come up with an idea of what's approvable, and get it done. This amendment was requested by the city manager, and he does recommend approval of the amendment. The required action tonight would be to hold a public hearing and make recommendations to the council regarding this particular amendment. If you read the actual changes that Mr. Davis has made, I believe there are a total of 3 where there's a strike through out of council and added the word manager where council used to be, and I believe that's the only change to the order. That's all I have. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I did have one question.
Yes.
Pertains more to what we had.
Excuse me, Charles,
I'm sorry.
is your microphone working?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Get in front of it. Can you hear him?
Anyway, it's in A1, or I'm sorry, A2D. It just refers to the state official vehicle inspection station, which, as far as I know, we don't have anymore. I know it's probably trying to give an example, but we don't have those anymore.
We don't have those anymore, right?
So
That was, I'm
Clean it
sure,
up, we can do that later, but
yeah, the only thing we wanted to do here was on community promotional banners. There wasn't any other change promote, but you're absolutely right. That was in there back when you had to get inspections and they had a mandated sign that had to hang, and so that was exempted or whatever from the ordinance,
I was
yes.
just
I
thinking,
think that'd be a good idea, just take that out, because you're right, there's not any such animal
Right.
in Oklahoma.
and there might be designation type signs, but that's just not a particularly good example.
Yep, those are the ones that don't require a sign permit or examples of those.
I noticed there's lots of references in here to the city inspector.
Yes.
Is that because he reports to the city manager, or is that
No, the
a
city
function of his
inspector-
duties?
The city inspector reports to the community development director.
Oh, okay. But the approval's gonna be the city manager if we go with this.
For just, this only pertains to community promotional banners. This doesn't affect any other normal sign
Yeah.
ordinance
Yeah.
function.
Oh, who hangs the banners? Does the entity?
Public Works.
The Public Works hangs them.
They are city brackets, and the signs have to be made to fit those brackets
Right.
and those, but the Public Works Department hangs the banners.
And the people that furnish the banners, they're the ones that pay the city to install them?
Normally, they provide the banners and the city crews install it. I don't believe there's any charge
There's
for
not
that
a charge.
installation, because these are designed to be for a community event, like the 4th of July
Yeah.
or the downtown festivals and things like that.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
If there are no further questions of staff, this is a public hearing item. Anyone wishing to address the commission is welcome to come to the podium. Please state your name and address.
My name is Beth Warstein, and I own the little store over here at New Enough at 3901 North College Avenue in Bethany. And my question is on signage. I was wanting to put like the size of a real estate for sale sign at the corner of 39th and College in the little bitty garden shrubbery area at the corner. And I was told that that was not allowed. And I was just wondering, what is the process to see about getting just a small little sign? Because all the shop owners along College, what we hear daily, even from people that have lived in Bethany, they say all their lives is, we didn't know shopping was down this way. And we were trying to find a way to put a little sign in that area that just says more unique shopping with an arrow. It's not in driver view or anything, it's just where the foot traffic can see it. But we were told by the city manager that that was not allowed by planning and ordinances.
I'll ask Mr. Davis to address that.
Well-
He'll give you a better recap.
I'm familiar with this request. I saw it, I don't know, maybe a few weeks ago. I think you sent a letter to the city manager. And there are a couple of problems. Number one, a specific business can't advertise off of the premises where it's located. But what my suggestion was that maybe the city consider a public informational sign, perhaps in the median there, that would direct people to businesses on College there.
Well, there were some erected many years ago that do have direct names on them that of course are no longer there. But they're on like close to the street light poles or city light poles, and they're outdated. But I know if you'll pay attention when you drive, you're not going, ooh, what's new? What sign is that? You're watching your traffic and the car in front of you, so really people don't see the signs. And all we want is just to get the foot traffic without specifically naming a store. We just want to let the people that walk know your shopping doesn't end right here. You can come on down around and visit 6 more shops.
Yeah, I would say you want to consider that, that's different than the issue that we advertised for tonight, but certainly there's nothing to prevent you from looking at that. There are several issues, though. One is that even the greenery that's located there on that corner is possibly a site triangle violation. If you've driven on College and you're stopped going north there and you try to see where there's traffic coming, going east, you'll find that some of those, if your car is low enough, some of that shrubbery is going to block your view, and that violates an ordinance as well. And signage would do the same thing. So, but there probably is some way to address what this lady's asking.
Yeah, I could take
May
a
not be
picture of
exactly
the
what
one
she's
I'm talking
asking for,
about,
but-
because where I'm wanting to put the little sign is actually not even close to the turning lanes. It's more at the sidewalk up close to the restaurant.
You know, that's not to say the city couldn't put up a pole on the sidewalk
Okay.
that allow people to buy directional signs for it, I suppose.
There are already a few created by City Hall, I believe, post office and parking lot. Doing all this stuff.
But that could be done with an ordinance change.
And I just didn't, what is the process to try to be able to get that little sign in there? Do I come something here first? Do I?
Probably what you're doing right now.
Okay. And what would be my next step? I really want that sign. I'm willing
Community
to make a
development.
sign and get it approved and,
The city manager's looking at this issue,
okay.
and I'd prefer we wait and, hear his comments on it, because he sent me an email asking me about it, and I gave him a couple of different options, and I've not heard back from him, so
He
let's wait and
passed-
see what his
He
recommendation is.
passed it on to a lady with Northwest Chamber of Commerce, and we've talked to her about it several times, and she felt like it was a city ordinance issue because of, that's who says we can't put a sign there, but,
Well, this
we're
was
just-
fairly recent that I got this
Okay.
communication, within the last 2 weeks, I'd say.
okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any others who would like to
Madam, before you leave, I just want to let you know, I'm Steve Palmer. I'm the city councilman for Ward 2. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making that an issue. And I've taken copious notes, and I will contact the city manager on your behalf to make sure that this is addressed, either as an item on the next city council, or we'll wait for a recommendation from the city manager and get back to you.
And we'll provide the sign, we'll keep it nice, and we can do it, we sure would love to. That's the tax.
We'll see what we can do.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you, council member. Now, do we need a motion?
Yeah, to recommend this to the city council. Unless there's some further discussion, motion to recommend approval or denial.
I'll make that motion with the one change that was discussed to delete
The vehicle inspection?
the words.
Signs designating the place of business as a state official vehicle inspection station.
Correct. Make that with that deletion.
A2D.
Is there a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Thank you. Go on to item number 3, PC 17-04. Consider amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Bethany, Title 15, by adding a new section 150.015 pertaining to fence permit requirements, providing for repealer and severability, and declaring an emergency. Staff, please.
This particular amendment, we, Commissioner Clemmer, you asked about the city inspectors, and we happen to have two really good ones now that have a really bad habit of actually reading ordinances and trying to do what it says. And they ask me hard questions a lot. And
Well, good
when
for
this,
them.
this was
Somebody
a
needs to.
major fence, just to give you a little background, a major fence replacement came up, and it became clear that our ordinance is not clear on exactly when a permit is required and when it isn't. And so we would very much like to define when a permit is required, remove that ambiguity, and so there will be no question as to where it is. Again, in the analysis section, it talks about the real purpose of a permit is to trigger the inspection process, and that way we have somebody out there making sure ahead of time at the application that it's going to be all right, and then to make sure it's actually done the way the ordinance is, with safety in mind as well as legality. In the case of a fence, our ordinance currently imposes several requirements for height, opacity, materials, where it must be, and things like that. And it also talks about sometimes the placement and use on a fence. But everybody kind of understands that if you're just replacing a couple of panels of a rotten wood fence, that doesn't need a permit. That's a simple minor repair. But if you're putting up a new fence, obviously you need to get a fence permit. And between those two extremes is where it gets a little fuzzy. So this amendment would add a section to the ordinance that clearly states a permit is required for a new fence, as well as repairs, modifications, or replacements if those operations involve changes in materials, location, or height. Why those three? Materials, if you're going from a chain link to a stockade fence, for instance, now you have opacity issues you might have to worry about, and this would make sure that the city inspector could make sure you're not. For instance, a chain link would be allowed beyond the front building line, but a stockade isn't unless you lower the height as well, so that would trigger that. That kind of talks about the height. Our maximum height on a fence is 8 feet, so we would make sure that you couldn't exceed the height limitations. Again, materials, you're not allowed to put barbed wire on top unless under certain very specific applications. And of course, location is the biggest one, because a lot of people, they like to change the fence, and I don't want to take the old one down till the new one's up because my dog will get out, so I'm sure my neighbor won't mind if I borrow a foot of his property to put the new fence up, so we have to make sure that's not happening. So that's what the purpose behind the change in material, location, or height that would also trigger the permit requirement. We don't think that would impose too much of a burden on a homeowner or a business. We obviously encourage them to maintain their fences. We don't want to make it too onerous where you just want to replace a few rotten posts or panels. You don't have to get a permit. But by the same token, we want to make sure that the ordinances are being met and the safety and legality are being upheld. So that's the purpose of this amendment. I believe that's all I have. Staff does recommend approval of the ordinance amendment. The required action is, again, hold a public hearing and make recommendation to the council either to approve or deny the amendment.
Any questions of staff?
The height is determined by measurement from where?
Oh, you would ask me that. It's actually called out in the ordinance, but I believe it's from ground level. You may not have it in front of you, but there is a reference to it.
I didn't see it.
It does actually talk about how it's to be measured, and I don't have it off the top of my head.
I think it's from the lowest elevation.
Yeah, I believe so.
I was involved in a lawsuit years ago in Brownsville, as a matter of fact. We're on one side of the fence, it was like 9 feet tall, but on the other side of the fence, it was 6. And you could easily have a situation like that. where
I
you got-
know exactly where there is one in
Yeah.
Brownsville that way, yeah.
So if somebody is placing their entire fence and they're not changing material, location, or height, they do not need a permit?
They do not.
Good.
My same issue, licensed versus registered. D2.
B2.
Happens to be land surveyor, but,
But this one does say licensed land surveyor on mine.
huh. Well, then how did I get the old one?
I don't know. Linda, what's up with that?
So sheet 21?
Steve, I have
Yeah.
a question. Part of it was answered with the question previous, but what if you're just changing, you're putting in metal posts instead of wood posts? Is that,
I do not believe that that would be considered a material change to the fence itself.
Okay.
That's the way I would interpret it. If the inspector told you you had to get a permit for that, and you called me, I would probably have a talk with the inspector and see about that, because to me, that's not what this is about. The post is obviously part of the fence system, but I don't believe that, as long as it was going back in the same, it's not a location issue, but a material on just the post, I don't think would trigger the permit.
In that same regard, I had a similar thought process. Someone still using a wood fence, but a different design wood fence. In other words, instead of the picket type fence, they put in the weave fence. In other words, still solid, you can't see through it, that type of thing. Would staff have any heartburn over using the word substantial? In other words, if any substantial changes.
I certainly would not have objection to that, other than it throws one more uncertainty. Is it substantial if I'm just going from 4 feet to 6 feet? And the answer to that is, depends on where the fence is. If it's beyond the front setback, that's extremely substantial. If it's in the backyard, it's not substantial. So.
Well, and of course, my thought was, as we were discussing before, more in the nature of replacement of a hole.
Right.
You know, down the north side of your property, you're not adding anything, you're just simply maybe changing the type or style of.
If it was just a design change, like you went from a straight stockade to a weave or an offset or something, that would not kick in a permit, because you're still going with a wooden stockade fence of the same height and the same material, still made of wood, something like that.
And you're promising to stay for the next 50 years. So that when we all go through this, we can
But
say,
you're right.
Steve, you told us.
But you're right. If you have a wooden stockade fence and it's rotten and you want to replace it with a nice new vinyl fence of the same size and everything else, technically you could say you're changing material, so you have to come get a permit. Frankly, it's a $20 permit, I think. I don't know if it's that onerous to make them do it, to be honest with you. And if it's a major replacement like that, maybe it's not such a bad idea. I don't know.
You assume too much, Charles. You assume that we will be around to remember it and be able to remember it.
Well, I think it forces them to at least ask the question.
Right.
To,
Right, and what you're just saying is exactly what triggered this whole item right here. The inspector saw old fence panels laying out, they see the whole thing getting ripped out, and new fence panels up, and so they go to the contractor and say, hey, what's going on? And it started the whole conversation of, did they have to have a permit to do that or not? Because by the time they got there, the new fence was up, so it was a little difficult to say if it was in the same location as the old one, and it would have been nice to be able to have something in writing to go with on that.
On the height of the fence, I misspoke, you measure it from the highest elevation. And when you think about it, that makes sense, because if this were your backyard and this were the
Right.
other side, and you had a 6-foot fence, if this was 6 foot higher in your backyard, that's all it would show, but you'd actually measure the height from here. So from your backyard, it might be 12 feet high.
Well, most people, when they hang the fence too, they run a string line and try to make everything as even as possible, or if it's a sloped property, they do the
most people.
step down.
Yeah, there are some odd lots, so where that's happened.
There are odd lots where you have to put the fence in front of the house whether you want to or not, or it looks really odd with a gap between the two neighbors because it's a cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
Or they have a swimming
And
pool
we
in
don't
their
have
front
a
yard.
code that defines that, but never mind. But what I was reading and referencing, I guess, was the older code that's in my packet on page 21. You have a page 21?
Those are the current fence regulations.
Yeah, and that's where I'm getting the
Are you
license
on, are you on
versus,
D is in Delta 2?
correct.
And that's the same one I'm.
And yours
Professional
says-
land survey and placement of front property pins by a licensed land surveyor is what mine said.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I guess I was putting the licensed up front and just by a said land surveyor. That's okay. I'll drop it.
Now, I believe this is a public hearing item also.
Yes, it is, sir.
All right. If there's no further discussion at the commissioner level, we'll see if there's anyone in the audience that would like to be heard. Hearing or seeing none. Commissioners, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve PC 1704 as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Please cast your votes. Item number 4, PC 1705, Chair and Vice Chair elections. We lost a very capable chair at our last meeting. Again, Ron, we appreciate your service. It's time to make a nomination for chair, and since I'm sitting here with the microphone, I'm going to nominate Commissioner Snyder for chair. Is there a second?
Thank you for your nomination.
I'll second that. Oh,
I'd be happy to serve. But if anyone else really is interested, please speak up, because
Please cast your votes. All right, one down. Vice Chair nomination.
well, I would nominate Mr. Carlson to continue in that position.
Again, if anybody else wants it, they're certainly welcome to it.
I'll second that.
Please cast your votes. Thank you. Yes, Steve.
Staff would also like to pass on the thanks to Mr. Burchett for his service. I just want to let everybody know we do have a plaque ordered. It was not here yet in time for this to commemorate his service and show our appreciation. So I'm sorry it wasn't ready for tonight's meeting.
Can you give us a little update on Commissioner Ethel? I believe Linda
As you
has.
know, Commissioner Sayer had a fall and suffered a head injury. She's still having some issues with passing out occasionally, and she's wearing a heart monitor now, trying to diagnose exactly what's going on. Of course, our thoughts and prayers are with her. She's not, she was very upbeat and everything about it, but she just is wearing the heart monitor, and they're just trying to run some tests to find out what is happening. So that's where
Thank
we
you.
are.
Our thoughts and prayers are with Ms. Ethel. I'd like to thank our two council members for coming this evening. We appreciate your attendance. And again, I'd like to welcome Justin Peck, our new arrival. We'll try to keep you entertained. If there is no further business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Somebody do
I
a
second.
Okay. Please cast your votes. Thank you. We are adjourned.